Hello and welcome to Daily Records. I am Tommy Burton, and today's Daily Record is by one of the most underrated and great Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson. That's right, Dennis Wilson. I know everyone, when they think of the Beach Boys, they think of Brian, and a lot of people know Carl. But Dennis was the drummer of the band and unfortunately lived in the shadows of his brothers, Carl and Brian, particularly Brian, because Brian was considered to be, and is, a musical genius. But Dennis was an incredibly gifted songwriter. This album is the only solo album he ever released. It was released on August 22nd, 1977. And it like I said, it's his debut and only solo album. Now, if you listen to the Beach Boys album, Sunflower, I think that album is where Dennis kind of really just fully blossoms and arrives as a songwriter. There were moments before that, songs like Little Bird, but you have on Sunflower the song Forever, which is one of the most beautiful ballads. And it kind of proved that Dennis was capable, while maybe not to Brian Wilson's level, but Dennis certainly was an excellent songwriter and arranger in his own right. Now, this album was released, like I said, in August of '77, and it actually outsold the Beach Boys' recent efforts. There were two singles from this album. River Song, which is the opening track on the album, opens with a big choral arrangement, and Dennis just comes in with this gravelly, great voice, ooh, that will melt your heart. It's a fabulous song. And of course, the song You and I. Unfortunately, those songs did not chart, so there weren't any huge hits on this. But a lot of Wilson fans, as well as Beach Boys fans, do consider Pacific Ocean Blue as one of his great achievements. And like I said, I don't put Dennis in a category with Brian. I think Dennis is great, and I think he is very underrated as a writer, as an arranger. I think he was capable of really nice stuff. He wrote beautiful songs, and this album has kind of built, especially since Dennis died in '83, has gone on to build in stature in the time since then. Brian Wilson. It was kind of funny. Brian later on talked about how great it was, but he kind of, he's kind of going back and forth that he didn't even know that Dennis had recorded the album at all, and so Dennis was problematic. And those of you that know the Wilson story or know the Beach Boy story knew that Dennis was kind of the wild man of the group. Drugs and alcohol played a large part in Dennis's sort of fall and eventual death. And so Dennis was never going to be consistent in any way. And I think because Brian was, heaped with all of this sort of attention and all the accolades, particularly early on, I think Dennis was content to just stay in the background, and I don't think Dennis was ever, reaching for those same heights, whereas Brian was. I think Brian was always challenging himself to do great and wonderful things, and so that's probably the complaint I have with Dennis, is that, and it may be because Dennis never just got the encouragement that he needed to do everything, because the album that came out posthumously, Bamboo, which was an album he was working on around the time that he died, also has some really wonderful songs, but some of them just fall flat. They just never reach the heights that I think Brian was able to reach at Brian's most spiritual and emotional. But Dennis definitely had an incredible gift. He had a nice, soulful voice. His voice wasn't as smooth or as pretty as Brian's was, particularly in the early days. So he wasn't maybe the vocalist that Brian and Carl was. All of these things, I think, led to Dennis just being kind of the underachiever of the group. And so for him to do great work, I think lends itself to think people are kind of surprised by it. This is a great album. It's worth finding. Pacific Ocean Blue. I highly recommend it, particularly fans of the Beach Boys, and even more so fans of the Wilsons. I will say that this album is probably better than Carl Wilson's solo efforts around the same time in the early 80s. And so I think Dennis was just, an underrated but gifted writer and arranger. And so that's why I chose Pacific Ocean Blue as today's daily record. Like, comment, subscribe, share down below. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. Love interacting with you guys. Check out the other channel, Tommy Burton's VC channel. In the meantime, I'll see you all again tomorrow with another daily record.